Good afternoon. This is the next video in my Continuous Oxford series. In the last one, I looked at some of the buildings in the Oxford University Radcliffe Observatory quarter, including the observatory and the design on which it was based, the Tower of the Winds in Athens. And then I came round to Observatory Street and looked at the Belsize Court flats and the coloured houses here. And what I'm now going to do is to move further down into Jericho by the canal and look at a Tallow-Factory that used to be there. And this was extremely smelly, apparently. So I'm now on Walton Street. That's Walton Street facing north. That's the Jericho cafe, which serves nice large slices of cake. That's Walton Street facing south. And I'm going to go down Crenham Street here. And right at the bottom is a street called Canal Street, which, not surprisingly, is next to the canal. You have to cross a footbridge to get onto the canal from Canal Street, and I'm going to go down to that footbridge. These are comparatively modern houses, far too modern to take part in the story that I'm going to tell. But have a look at the older houses as I go downwards. So that is, I'm on Crenham Terrace, and that is Juxon Street in the distance. That's Flats, the green and pink building. It used to be a pub called the Globe. And yes, I'm going to get to it indirectly. So I'm going down Allam Street. You get all these little pieces of ornamentation in Jericho, and it's not always easy to find out where they came from and what the buildings originally did. This is Mount Street. And I'm coming up to an area called Mount Place, which has been refurbished with the help of the council and several local residents into a small garden, as you'll see. From time to time, parties are held here during the summer, generally on Saturday or Sunday. There's often a stall selling German sausage, beer, music, maybe books for sale, and so on. That in the distance is the footbridge over the canal. Some of the plants. I'd say that the garden is past its best now, but that's just the passage of the seasons. So these, I think, are council flats.
She was looking out the window and seeing time.
In the background is St Barnabas, and on the other side, though you can't see any more than a sliver of pub sign, is the old bookbinders. And this is Mount Place.
As the cab drove across the Cumberland Bridge, Mr. Callahan said, "They say you never cross the Cumberland Bridge without seeing a white horse. I see a white man."
And this is the garden.
Where? Asked Mr. Bartow. Gabriel pointed to the statue, which no patches of snow. Then,
So, most of the houses round here were built in the 19th century, and candles or oil lamps would have been the only lighting available at these early times, at least until gas lighting was both available and reliable enough and actually affordable. Gas meters weren't around until 1890s, apparently, which probably meant that gas wouldn't have been used in some of these houses until well into the 20th century. So the owners would still be using candles or oil lamps. Electricity wasn't available in Oxford until 1892, and it seems that only the better off could afford it in their homes until the 1930s. So people needed oil lamps or candles. Nowadays, I believe, candles are mainly made from paraffin. You can get beeswax candles for use in church and so on, but that's very expensive. and some specialist manufacturers will do candles made from soy, vegetable wax, and so on. But these are really craft items and not affordable just for lighting. At the time the houses were built, tallow would probably have been the only material available. Paraffin was yet to become both available and affordable. And tallow is not a particularly nice substance. It's basically sort of purified animal fat, and it's made from the boiled carcasses of sheep and cows and whatever. And I understand that the process of making it is called rendering. Having boiled the carcasses, presumably, I'm guessing somewhat, but the fat will separate out. Fat is not miscible with water. And I suppose you get big lumps or pools on the surface, and you have to sort of scoop those out, separate them very crudely, and they'll be mixed up with water and animal tissue and blood and all sorts of other stuff. So the first thing apparently is to heat them slowly until the fat all melts and separates out from the animal tissues and other gunk. Then you can strain it through a mesh and separate most of the gross impurities. And then maybe you have to do that once or twice more. And then you get a fairly pure solution of mixed fats. And you cool that and solidify it. And what you have then is tallow. And once you've got tallow, it's pretty straightforward to make candles, presumably just by putting them in a mould, letting them set and inserting the wicks. Well, I suppose you insert the wicks just before the candles have set. Well, if you need tallow, you need somewhere to make it, and you need somewhere to put the place that you make it. And that was the function of Mount Place. Apparently there was a tallow factory here from the late 1860s to just before World War I. The first advert for the factory is recorded in 1869. And it seems that it was pretty unpopular. I suppose if you imagine taking a very large pan, putting a dead cow in it, boiling the cow, and then straining off the fat and purifying it by the way I've just described, you can imagine how smelly it would be. Wet dog smells bad enough, so boiled cow and cow fat must be terrible. And the residents campaigned for years, one reference says, to have the factory removed. Another says that there were widespread protests in 1899. A brighter note is that the small boys liked the factory because, quote, you could get lots of maggots there with which to fish. Anyway, that was Mount Place. Very, very smelly. As far as I can see, there aren't any remnants of the factory above ground, though there may be something underneath, foundations or whatever. I'm going to pass by Mount Place as I go over the footbridge, and I'll then explain where I'm going next. Nope, I can't see anything that looks like part of a tallow factory, but then I'm not an expert. Now I'm going to go over the footbridge onto the canal. So I came over here once before when I visited the Jericho festival. That's the canal north going towards Port Meadow. And I'm now going to walk south to Osney, because there's a connection between Osney and the Tallow-Factory. The first owner of the factory lived there, and in fact had a house built, a noticeably large house, larger than most of the houses around it. So let's go to Osney, walking down the canal. Passing St Barnabas. And passing a good few narrow boats. Now I'm at the Isis Lock, where the canal joins part of the Thames. And I'm approaching what is called Sheepwash Channel, where this collection of waters joins the so-called Four Rivers or Four Streams area a little bit west of here. Now this is annoying. Keir Construction have been rebuilding the station bridge for over a year, and I understand that they've just given themselves about another year before they have to finish. They closed the towpath here on the 15th of May without notice to people using it, and so they've blocked off this bit. Admittedly, you can get past, but there's no point in doing so because they've fenced off the other end. So that's the little track that runs alongside Sheepwash Channel, and that used to give access to the Four Rivers Junction, and from there southwards a handy path to the side of Botley Road past the station bridge. So Keir have inconvenienced people massively by blocking off this route, the most direct route to Jericho, and they've done nothing to compensate. I'm going to have to go round, which will add 5 to 10 minutes to my walk. There may not be a through road, but there is fortunately a through path. So this takes me along the side of the station. That building over there is the station. So, if Keir had been quicker, and admittedly if Thames Water hadn't also decided to get in on the act, I'd have been able to go along the channel that you saw blocked by the 15th of May sign and then almost immediately turn left and walk down the side of the Thames and come out here. Anyway, I'm now in Osney and I want to talk about the big house on the corner. Now crossing Osney Bridge. And I'm coming onto North Street at its corner with East Street. And a building which is currently occupied by the West Oxford Democrats club, not pub, and which has been so for quite a few years. I don't know how long. This is the sort of thing that the West Oxford Democrats Club do. So the question is, why is this building so big compared to the others around it, compared to those? And it seems that it was built in 1881 by a chap called Charles James Harrison, whose main business was as an auctioneer of animal hides and skin. And he then expanded the business into tallow. He converted the animal fat from the carcasses that yielded his hides and skins into tallow by the rather disgusting methods that I talked about while I was at Mount Place. He was actually, at least for some of the time, in partnership with a councillor, John Lucas. But anyway, this apparently made him a lot of money, or even more money than he had already. And he lived, I think when he first came to Oxford, he lived in Park End Street, but he built this house, which I believe was called Riverside, with some of his business proceeds, and moved presumably in 1881. He didn't actually have very many years to enjoy the house because he died in 1889, but his wife Ellen continued the business. Don't know whether this was all the way to the end of the Tallow-Factory in just before World War I. Anyway, that is Mount Place, Jericho's Tallow-Factory, East Street and North Street in Osney, and the house of the person who founded the factory. I like to think of him as walking up the canal to Mount Place when it became necessary to inspect the factory or do what else you do when you're making tallow. So maybe he followed the route that I took today, though without the hindrances imposed by Keir construction. Until next time.